Welcome to episode 236 of Sports Geek. On this week's episode, I chat with Rostify's Shannan Gove about managing staff for the world's biggest sports events.
Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host who thinks 33% of stats are made up, including this one, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, my name is Sean Callanan, and who doesn't like stats? Hey, digital stats, view times, uniques, lifetime customer value, acquisition, costs. They're the off-court money ball. And then you've got the on-field money ball. Analytics around what is a better shot. Is a three-pointer better? Is it better to get on base? Is it better to get a home run? Moneyball is all data, whether it be on-court or off-court. I think it will just drive the success of sport in the next decade and esports. It's really interesting, the stuff we're starting to do, looking into the stats of League of Legends and seeing if there is some Moneyball insights around what the stats can tell us and potentially give our coaches an edge. Are you someone that works with data, whether it be on the business side or the sports side? Please get in touch. You can reach me, Sean, at sportsgeekhq.com, or via most social media at Sean Callanan or at Sports Geek. Before I get into this interview with Shannan Gove, I would just wanted to talk to you about, I'd love to work with you as a podcast listener. I'd love to work with you as a podcast listener. I've done it with a few in the past, worked with some of my guests and some of the people who listen. But you don't know where to start? Let's try it with a Pick My Brain session. If you're looking at a problem in the digital space, you need a team that needs a little bit of a rev up around what they're doing, or you just want to review what you're doing. You need a bit of a sounding board on what you're planning to do for a platform or for a season launch or for a finals campaign. That's pretty much what I do on the day-to-day work at Sports Geek, and working with teams, working on things like campaigns, reviewing what you're doing in the digital space, looking at ad campaigns, how you can get better lift out of what you're doing, or working with your commercial teams to help them understand how they can drive more revenue from what they're doing in the digital space. So you can do that by booking in a Pick My Brain session. Simply go to sportsgeekhq.com/pickmybrain, and you can book in for a 2-hour consulting session via GoToMeeting. If you need any more details, just send me an email, Sean at sportsgeekhq. And now I want to get into my interview conversation with Shannan Gove, the co-founder of Rostify, who talks about his workforce management solution and some of the things he's learnt helping manage large paid and volunteer workforce in the world of sport. Very happy to be joined by startup founder and co-founder of Rostify, Shannan Gove. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, mate. Pleasure to be here.
Wanted to, talk to you about, your journey in the sports world and where Rostify's at. Caught up with you a couple of years ago now, or maybe even not even that long, and you were talking about where you were taking the product, and it's just gone. You just keep leveling up every time I check in.
Yeah.
People talk to me about where I am in the world. I think you're racking up more frequent fly miles than me at the minute.
Yeah, it's been a busy year. Yep.
So just first of all, give everyone a little bit of a background. How did you get into the sports business?
Yeah, it's a good question. We actually started a separate company called Event Workforce actually back in 2010.
Yep.
So it's Bennett Merriman, my cousin actually, and yep. I was studying at Deakin Burwood down the road doing sports management, and realised the need for students like myself that were pretty motivated to get experience, yet everyone's emailing info at AFL or Cricket Australia saying give me a job, but it's the same old process. The same old process gets rejected every time.
Yep.
On the flip side, you see that the Cricket Australias and Melbourne Marathons, you name it, all need casual staff that are actually motivated and care about the work that they do. So
were you doing some of that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the short story around it is Melbourne Marathon 2010, I think, they actually needed a full shipping container worth of tuna tins needing to be moved out of the G by the morning or else they were going to get a fine.
Okay.
And they said, surely you're on res, heaps of sports students, surely you can just wrangle some up. And my thought was, but you're IMG, surely you have this database of sports students that actually want to be here. And that's where the response was, well, no, we're busy running events. We don't have time to manage staff.
Yep.
And so that is the same response from all clients. And that was why back in the day we started a company called Event Workforce to quite simply link motivated students to give them opportunities into the event space.
And so it was that staffing solution, and people say from a startup point of view, you try to find a problem and solve a problem, and that's what the problem was. And this is before things like on demand, like Airtasker type of platforms that have evolved in the last 10 years or so. And so you're pretty much looking at that, hey, these quick scale up events like a marathon and those kind of things, and they need a large volunteer workforce. So how was it done previously?
Backpackers, just whoever was around would just be called friends and family. Like you speak to any of my friends, anyone in the event space, their family have all been involved with their journey. When inevitably they need more people, they're calling their husbands, wives, whatever, and then just putting posts out at Backpackers and Facebook posts, whatever. So this is where we saw the opportunity to go, well, instead of doing that and potentially burning a lot of bridges and overworking people, whatever it is, how about you just get some people that genuinely want to be there? And at the start, so back then it was you had to volunteer your first event to be able to then be paid.
Okay.
To really make sure that staff were in it for the right reasons. And then as we grew over sort of 3, 4, 5 years, we started working nationally and working on some really large scale events that it's sort of now to date that company still runs, and that's 99% all paid work, paid casual work by awards and everything like that.
And so what was it wasn't, I guess early on it was you going around to unis and hitting up sports management courses and those kind of things, but then a business becomes its processes and those kind of things. So what were some of the early things you had to roll out to make that easier? Because wrangling staff that's the problem. You just don't want to inherit that problem.
Yep. Yeah, we've faced most problems under the sun, I would say, over the last 9-10 years of running business. But I think a prime example is we picked up Suncorp. So for me, I was flying up, finding the cheapest Tiger flight at 5 a.m. every Friday and going up to do a 3-hour activation for the Brisbane Broncos.
Yep.
And the reason I did that was because we didn't really know much about our staff other than names on spreadsheets.
Yep.
And so we'd go up to make sure we could meet them, screen them, spend time at university so that we could grow that database and have an understanding of who these staff were. But these processes are quite clearly unsustainable from an administrative perspective, but then it's also about going from the workforce perspective. We started this business to provide a great experience to them so that they could get experience and take that experience to potential job interviews.
Yep.
But we weren't giving them a good enough experience. They were getting a BCC email with 10s, 15, whatever it is, others. So we wanted to build a portal for them to be able to track that experience, get certificates, get photo galleries of their work. So we decided for 2 reasons, administratively and then from a workforce engagement side, that we wanted to build a technology solely selfishly for our own reasons to help that business grow.
And so it was effectively software as a service, effectively from the event industry point of view, but it allowed you to better administrate that database, because it's no good just having lots of names in Excel spreadsheets if you can't communicate with them effectively, know who's qualified to do what. Yep. So that's pretty much what that technology back end was.
Well, look, to be quite honest, we never had any idea to sell Rostify as a business.
Okay.
Rostify started solely as a process driven from Event Workforce, so managing up to 1,000 events a year, 20,000 casual staff on the database. We built a system to solve that problem.
Yep.
And then we realized, hey, this same system could relate to our friends at Cycling Australia, at Ironman, whatever it was. And then we thought, hey, let's see how we can make this a business.
Yeah, so take us through, because it's not really a pivot, it's a product and a business that's come out of the Event Workforce Group business.
Yeah, correct.
In that you've built out this product and going, it's working for us, it's enabling us to do all these different kinds of events. What was that process like in the extracting of that and saying, hey, there's another business here?
Yeah, it was actually friends that came to us. we never thought this was going to be anything other than an internal process. So friends came to us going, how are you guys possibly managing to do all these things in Perth, Queensland, whatever it was? And we said, oh, well, we've built this little thing. And then they said, well, I'm facing the exact same problem. And it was actually Jen Dwyer, a good friend of ours from, at the time, Cycling Australia. And she was doing the Cairns mountain bike World Cup.
Yep.
And had lots of volunteers to manage. And so she was our first client, inverted commas, as sort of a, hey, let's see how we can sort of grow this thing and see how it works. And we learned a lot from that. And then we did a few others. And then actually the Netball World Cup was at 2015 that year. And somehow we pitched in there with this idea saying, we've got something here.
Yeah.
And we won it, probably more based off the personal relationships and knowing that if we say that we can do something, we would from Event Workforce Days.
Yep.
And that was our first paid gig, and that's when we thought let's make this a real thing.
So Rostify, to clarify for people who are listening, what is the product? What's the pitch? Do you have a 140 character tagline of what Rostify is?
Yeah, sure. So it's obviously this wasn't the idea in the beginning, but Rostify now really is one of the global leaders in workforce management technology. So we built it now, obviously, for the mass workforce management for major events predominantly, which we'll probably talk through later on. But we've realised that anyone that needs to manage lots of staff, be it paid or volunteers, traditionally, they're using pretty outdated spreadsheets, non-fit for purpose technologies like Rego system, this sort of thing. So that's where Rostify sits, effectively as a workforce CRM.
Yeah, and so then from a client point of view, and you sort of touched on it there, and the different types of events you sort of found yourself in, whether it's a Netball World Cup as a major event or back into that, your starting point of the participation type of piece. What are the different types of events that you've found Rostify's worked really well for?
Yeah, the larger the workforce, the more close to 100% you're using the system is probably the most simple way of putting it. So for major events like the Super Bowl and now all the way up to World Expo, which is, I think, probably one of the largest mobilizations of mass workforce in recent history. I think 1.5 million shifts they're going to be putting through Rostify. So that level of automation at that top end for major events is certainly sort of the prime optimization of the platform. But now we're more seeing for event management companies, so like London Marathon or Amsterdam Marathon, Melbourne Marathon, these clients of ours that have paid workforce and volunteers, how to, instead of having 5 different internal staff members managing different relationships there, how do you centralize that and be able to communicate, track those journeys of all those staff members? So I think there, and then charities, not-for-profits, that's another prime example of client there that they traditionally, let's face it, a lot of charities wouldn't exist without volunteers, especially how well connected those volunteers are. Lots of connection between them and donors. But again, traditionally very spreadsheet based and old school mentality. We've got a lot of great client testimonials from that space too. So
is your main pitch going in, other than the headache of managing hundreds or thousands, more likely the thousands of doing that, is it a cost saving of people costs? Like you said before, 6 people have to manage these teams, and your system can not eliminate those 6 people, but free up those 6 people to do other tasks. Is that pretty much the main pitch? Yeah,
quite simply. Two reasons why we exist. One is to reduce the administrative time and cost involved with managing workforce, and secondly, to increase retention and engagement of workforce. Obviously, the flip side of that administrative spreadsheet time, phone calls, whatever it is, is the end result is very poor for the workforce. And them going, well, I'm not that engaged in this process because you've rostered me onto 3 things at the same time and you haven't paid me for 3 weeks because you don't know where my paperwork is. And so that is the 2 core reasons we exist.
And so from an expansion point of view and, having success, and I've spoken to a bunch of people on the podcast, especially in Australia, in Melbourne, on how well Australia does major events. Has that helped you in the conversation you're having internationally to sort of point at, what Australia does from a major events point of view? Does it give you credibility when you're talking to a Super Bowl or a big event in Europe?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think Australia is a good proving ground.
Yep.
It's so tough here, effectively, compared to other places around the world because it's so small in a way. It's kind of very relationship based here. And so often if you can prove yourself out here in Australia, then you're probably going to succeed overseas because the opportunities are much larger over there.
Yep.
So if you can get a good market size here, it means that there's a much larger market overseas for you. So less probably about Australia being such a sports-focused nation, but that clearly flows into us winning contracts here that are related to sports. So yeah, there's definitely a flow on.
What was from some of your early big wins internationally?
Our first biggest one was Tough Mudder. Endurance and mud sport. That's a significant client still to date globally, and that was our first big one.
Yep.
And that was pretty crazy, to be quite honest. It was we just sort of won Netball World Cup, and then there was a global tender going for the Tough Mudder contract, and we were up at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the morning for calls, trying to tell them we have something here, but we're not really sure where it fits with what you're doing. And again, came down to a relationship that we knew the guys from helping them launch Tough Mudder in Australia with the workforce business. And I guess they trusted us and knew us to say, and they basically said, don't F it up and gave us the contract. So that was our first big one. And then from there, a few other major ones rolled on.
And has it mainly been in that tender space? Because really, 8 to 10 years ago, this staff management space didn't exist.
Yep. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Short answer is probably no. Most of the time, we are presenting to clients almost a new idea around how they can improve. And a prime example, we signed London Marathon events last year. So probably Europe's largest, and ASO as well, Amaury Sports. They run the Tour de France. Both of these organisations have spent the last 6-7 years trying to find something in this space.
Yeah.
And then I guess when they became aware of what we did, we were able to sign them pretty instantaneously. And so now we take those case studies and we speak to Amsterdam Marathon and say, hey, how are you guys managing this? And they go, well, we don't really have any process. We just assume that it's meant to be hard and we suck it up and do it.
Yep.
And so now when we can walk in and say, well, here's how these guys do it over here, would you be interested? I'm not saying it's an easy sell by any means, but it's often that they haven't got to the stage of tender process yet.
Yeah, because no one's realising, which of these solutions are we going for, because they've just been using the same bad process, or their systems are groaning at some point of, how do we keep managing this if we've got a growing event? Yeah. And it's just that they haven't even looked at it. Yeah, and that's predominantly in that sort of step down from major events. Certainly for major events, there's always a tender process you need to follow, and major charities, not-for-profits, governments, cities, these sorts of things that almost have to do a tender process for the sake of doing a tender process. But you're right about there are probably other items more higher up the queue in a tender process than us. Yeah. And there's other like sexier things. Yeah, like people CRMs. Are going, hey, how do we do a CRM, or how do we register all our people, or how do we need an app developed, or how do we get Bluetooth beacons on our course? Yeah. So there are all these other things, but you're just, this will help save you money and make your workforce more efficient. Yep. And hey, here's the testimonials just to prove out that it works. So what's it like, I guess the move from running an event staffing solution and building out this database of people who could work to a software as a service business and pitching that product? Has it changed your workday? Yeah, it's workday's a very loose term at the moment with lots of stuff overseas. But I think at the very beginning, we were very afraid of cannibalizing the staffing business because we give clients this technology that's going to streamline their process of managing staff. Then why do they need staff in the first place? Yep. And so that's where just quickly, it was Event Workforce was staffing and Rosterify was the tech. And then we brought it to be Event Workforce Group because we thought, hey, we're going to be able to sell in both technology and staffing under the same group. Yep. But the challenge with that, and this is what we learned, was that then we set up an office in San Francisco. Yep. And we're pitching Event Workforce Group, and they're saying,
in America, they're saying, okay, where are these staff that you've got? And we're like, well, they're in Australia and they're no use to you here in America.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, why is this part of your company now? And so that was probably a mistake that we learned through the process. And then that's when we fully separated the two businesses to be Event Workforce Group, just Australian-based staffing company, and Rostify being the international technology business.
And did that help from an investor funding point of view to sort of separate that? Because otherwise you've got that same confusion if you're talking to an investor.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one thing we're proud of is that we haven't had investment yet. So we've been bootstrapped since day one, since we're at university, and we've just opened up that conversation now. I guess we've always just wanted to prove ourselves first and do it in that sense. And I feel like we've done that, and we're doing that at the moment. So now is a pretty good opportunity with some of these large contracts to go get some investment and grow the team, because everyone's working pretty hard at the moment, as you can imagine. And we want to support that and grow the team out significantly to support our growth.
But the thing is, but it gives you that nice, clear definition of what the two businesses are. And, when you are talking to investors, or at least setting the path for where investors might come along, it's much easier to say, this is what this business is. Yep. These are the customers. This is the proposition, and here's how we're going at acquiring customers. Here's the revenue we've got coming in. So it's much clearer rather than saying have two stories.
For sure, absolutely, and so that's a big reason for it.
And so then, what's it like with major events and the workforce around something like the Super Bowl? Because that's it's a super. It's an amazing event, but it's just this convergence of people coming to a town that they don't normally come to. So it's not the same as a Australian Open or a London Marathon that's always in the same spot. What kind of challenges does that kind of event offer from a staffing perspective?
It's a good question. I think depending on the nature of that event, depends on the likelihood people will want to get involved.
Okay.
So I guess the polar opposites are a Super Bowl in America. That's always a different spot every year, but everyone knows the game, everyone knows the sport.
Yep.
Houston Super Bowl, we had 35,000 volunteer applications in a matter of weeks. You need to siphon that down to 10 and a bit thousand. And so you 1/3 of which the applications you're needing to filter out and screen.
Yep.
The T20 World Cup, who we just signed in Australia, they're going to have the same problem. Cricket, everyone knows it. They love it. They want to be involved. There's going to be probably more that miss out than actually get roles.
Yep.
But then with Dubai World Expo, and perhaps maybe some clients we're chatting to in Saudi Arabia at the moment, where volunteering and working that style of, casual nature and volunteering, even at the next level, is a new thing for them.
Okay.
And so that's where the challenges lie for those emerging markets, I guess, that at the end of the day, for us, we provide the technology to the client, and then we try and work with them as best we can to see how that demand can be increased from the locals' perspective.
So as a technology provider, how do you stay in your lane, so to speak? Because the easy thing would be to a certain degree, put your Event Workforce Group on and say, this is how you can recruit, and this is how you can help fill out your workforce. Like how much do you try not to get too far down that path, because it's a little bit off, I guess, your tech focus? Yeah,
it's a good question, and you can get caught sometimes, I think, because at the end of the day, we want our clients to be successful. And so I think there's always going to be an element of that.
Yep.
To be doing everything we can to make sure that they're successful. And so Beth, as an example, is our staff member in Dubai, and I know she works really closely with their team over there. But, I mean, that's a substantial team that they've got set up, a local organising committee of hundreds, thousands of staff. So often they are recruited specifically to do those jobs. And so as long as we do stay in our lane, but then if we can help where we can, great. But they've contracted us to do this. So let's do that really well and see how we can help on top.
But from a I guess, cycle of where you start and where you finish, you do start from, hey, we're helping you take applications, screening the candidates, getting the security and those kind of things done to help them get them in, to rostering them during event and that kind of stuff, and then also the exit and allowing them to be post-interview. That's pretty much where you fit.
Yeah, the full cycle, the full end-to-end journey can be done through our platform, and I think that's kind of a point of difference in what we offer compared to bit parts.
Yep.
But the best thing to get back to your consulting part there, is that we're just doing the Cricket World Cup in the UK right now, but just last week we signed the T20 World Cup in Australia. And so there's a lot of process there. And, when do you open roles? When do you close them? When do you offer interviews? Do you do them in person or not? And you take a lot of those learnings and then you pinch a bit from Super Bowl and you pinch a bit from the Netball World Cup and you sort of roll it in, and it's all internal knowledge now. So for us, internally, we strongly believe that there's so much more than just a platform here that we're helping with.
So from a team point of view, you talk about the platform. Is there a particular, like, have you got a tech stack or a development team? Like, what's the mix of development team and building out the platform and the different pieces to effectively what you're talking about before, the account service and customer acquisition team? What's the mix like at the minute?
Yeah, still a really small team, to be quite honest. So we do our development based out of our Melbourne offices. Our business partner, Chris Grant, who I guess built the platform in the first place for us for Event Workforce back in the day, is still now involved as a business partner. He's actually based in New York now. We have a small team in San Francisco that's account-based and sales-based in San Fran. In London, predominantly account support and technical account support, and then Dubai predominantly focus on technical and account support based in those regions. So that at all times, 24 hours in a day, our clients can get access to, we use Zendesk, obviously, but then so direct tickets and they can get access support from either a technical or account support at all times.
And from the end user, from the staff member, is it all mobile? Email, SMS, like how does the system talk to staff members?
Yeah, it's we haven't had an app until now.
Okay.
And we've done it deliberately that it's in particular in volunteering, it's another step, it's another hurdle they have to take, especially traditionally volunteering older generations. Do they want to be downloading an app? Do they have a mobile phone that's capable to download the app?
Yep.
So you want to put it on a silver platter and make it as easy as they can. But through World Expo and a few other clients that do need now apps, we're actually developing one. Just last week I had my first look at it and it looks fantastic. So that'd be a fully white labeled app for the clients if they want to have it as an additional option for their subscription with Rosterify. And we can't wait for that to be launched later this year,
Okay, yeah. So effectively it'll allow you to effectively have all your credentials and your roster and your notifications and your alerts all in the one place. Absolutely. Okay. And currently it's just web-based and email.
Correct. Yeah, all mobile optimized. So effectively the same results, just not requiring them to download anything.
And, it is the question of, we've got to build an app. Like that, do you need an app? Can a website do the job? Is always a bit of backwards and forwards because there's a large cost in building out an app, and then it just becomes more architecture you've got to then support.
For sure, and that's a lot of it's what we find, and people can overcomplicate it. They, and I'm sure we're not the only industry. This happens across anything. So it's just about going, what's the core problem we can help solve? Because there's lots of problems within the workforce journey that, can be solved, but let's tick off 1, 2, 3 and then let's work out a plan into later. And sure, you want the sexy app and that's going to happen one day, but is that going to solve the same problem at the same time? Like, let's look at what's available here at the moment and let's do that.
And so from a event organizer point of view, who are the people inside the orgs that love you guys the most?
Well, it's got to be the workforce managers predominantly. And then what we love seeing, though, is feedback from the CEOs and managing directors, general managers going, our team is so much happier because they've got this, or, hey, I've noticed that my staff members gone from 5 days to 3 days. The other 2 days are now spending actually growing the workforce team, engaging with them, presenting at universities where previously, the reality is workforce managers are very qualified, skilled people, and they're traditionally in spreadsheets, they're doing the jobs of what a uni grad can do. It's black and white. That's the truth. And so how do you free those people up so that they can do what they're qualified to do? And that's build a great workforce program. And that's where that feedback from the GMs and stuff comes in.
And how much, so in full disclosure, back in my Geek days, I was a developer on a rostering, a hospital rostering around nurses. And And one of the things around putting in their shifts, there's a whole bunch of things around the award and what you can, when you can put them on shift and when you can't, and certain shift patterns and that kind of stuff. Is that a big part of? Because I'm assuming that changes from region to region, event to event, state legislation, those kind of things. Because it's a bit like a game of Tetris rostering, isn't it?
For sure.
How much is that the secret sauce of what you guys do?
Yeah, it's, again, good question. I think that real detailed complexity of that level is something that we're going to really nail later this year and probably early next year as we continue to grow our platform. I think that full workforce CRM, tracking the journey of staff, scheduling, communicating, those staff getting a great experience is the core of what Rostify is right now.
Yep.
But those additions of, like you're talking about, alerts and things, we already have them built in we did the Com Games last year. There was elements of it for that.
Yep.
But I think we can improve again on that space because the more, as you touched on at the start, this workforce generation is only going to be more casual, and there's lots of legislation around it, as there should be. And so that's a real opportunity for us to nail. It's just nothing that we've probably nailed just yet.
But the thing is also, as the more events you do, the more data you'll get. Like you'll start seeing, you are pulling best practice from different pieces, but also as you start analysing the data of, this is the ideal amount of events you should do at a Grand Slam, or this is how many times, like you'll start getting those efficiencies out of the data as you do more events.
Yep, for sure. It's incredible moving from one event to another, the amount of information you gather around these. And it's funny, Chris Grantham, our business partner, he's probably the most, and Amy as well in our team who looks after operations. The two of those have experience at the top level of all of these major events. And so that intel that they're gaining from these in terms of process, when someone says, I'm thinking about doing it this way, you can probably have some information and go, well, there's the last three, maybe you think about it in another way. But at the end of the day, clients are going to make their own calls and that's fine, whatever they want to do. But you're right, there is a lot of valuable information that's gone into our platform.
Yeah. And then the thing is, the people, and I'm trying to say it the right way, there's a lot of people that do the major events, and they do it from, the 2-year stint or the 4-year stint, whether they're working on Olympics or World Cups and those kind of things. And they like the long, slow build of those type of events, and then the manic pressure of for 14 days or the 3 weeks or the 2 days or whatever it is, because there's the thrill of the chase and the thrill of the event. But there's a lot of IP that they're bringing. So whether it's working at every Grand Slam or working at marathon circuit or working at cycling.
Yep.
And I guess you're starting to get getting some of that info as well from a staff workforce.
Yeah. I think, and if you don't mind, a little plug, but we've just last week actually launched our first white paper on major event workforce management. And so with that, we've pulled together 10 of the world leaders in this space, from Super Bowl, Com Games, you name it. They've been involved with every single step. You touched on them before a little, training, interviewing, whatever it is. We've got experts in each of those fields talking about that, because and when I spoke to them about this white paper, they were like, this is great. I get to actually talk about this stuff, because like you said, they cram and they get this event finished and then they're burnt out and then they move on to the next. So they never have an opportunity to really,
there's no debrief in major events.
There's no debrief.
There's like, you watch the closing event of a big ceremony and then like literally 3 days later, 80% of the staff force that have worked on the event for 2 or 3 years are gone. Yeah. And there's someone that's doing a few final reports for a governing body or a local government that's put in a bunch of funding. But a lot of them are like, it's like, school's out, everybody, and they're moving on to the next event.
Yeah, absolutely.
So sometimes there is some of that information and IP does get lost.
Absolutely.
Unless you've got that rolling, major that's happening every year, that you can keep some of that in-house.
Yeah, and what I've found in technology, which I found actually quite strange, to be honest, some of our, not really competitors, but other technology solutions in that space, they're almost building from scratch every time.
Yep.
Where Rostify is a central platform that we build on top of every single time. And so it gets the learnings where others go the approach of just building custom for each time.
Yep.
And it's interesting that that's still happening in technology. I understand how that happens in human capital and workforce. They have to move on. But we try and make sure everything we learn from events, we debrief on. with the client, and then we see how we can improve on our system moving forward.
So, what were some of the key takeaways from that white paper?
So many. I think there's some elements in there that most workforce managers wouldn't even think about.
Okay.
The level of detail in building out a demand of a workforce. So a lot of people might start by going, I think we need about 3,000 volunteers.
Yep.
But then Richard Arthur, who worked Com Games, is now over in Qatar, who's a specialist in demand workforce. Having his input around this about working with other divisions and scaling up and scaling down to actually firstly work out what you need.
Yep.
Like that in itself is a science compared to just starting with a number and then just sort of working it out and then halfway through realizing, oh no, we actually need double that or half of that, and you've already too far down the line. And so the biggest probably takeaway I got was the top 3 steps in each process you need to do so you don't trip it yourself up later down the line. We've been involved with so many events across the journey where they realise that, prime example, they've opened Regos, 30,000 people complete them, and then they realise that they need a social security number. And they go, oh, gee, that's a bit too late to find that out. So they're the key things, is like how not to slip up in each step. If you do these core things right, then you should be able to progress. And the other fluffy stuff can come around it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because, you do have one of those misses.
Yep.
And it's the time that it takes to catch up on that thing. We've just got to go out to 30,000 people and get their social security. It pushes your whole time frame out another 4 weeks.
Correct.
And you just don't have the 4 weeks.
No, you're minus 4 weeks anyway.
Yeah. So the other stuff. What's the next 12 to 18 months look like for you guys?
Sure. So I guess in June this year, we're launching Rosterify 2.0. So basically, ultimately the same outcome for our clients, just on the latest technology to make it more scalable and also to make it more easily integrated with. And so we find the workforce, a big challenge for clients and anyone probably listening is thinking, oh no, not another tech system. And so for us, we know that that's the case. We want to be able to integrate with the journey of your CRM with other providers that are involved with workforce that help your business run. So we're really conscious of that. So building out a system that can be integrated with very easily. The mobile app is launching later this year. And then that investment journey we touched on is something that we're starting basically now. And so we're having a few conversations at the moment, but we're certainly we're excited about what that can bring and just partnering with the right people to help us scale.
Okay. Yeah, it's just, like you just said, just getting all those pieces right, ready to go to this where you need to get to. Yeah. And is there any particular types of events or customers that you want to tackle that you haven't, or is it more expansion into the current events you're currently doing?
Yeah, I think it's probably the latter. The headline ones that we'd love to work with would be your FIFAs and probably your Com Games Federation, which is coming up. They're probably the headlines that we're really chasing. But we have a lot of great sort of testimonial clients that everyone would know of in each of our verticals we work in across charities, whatever it is. So really it's about, we've got those headlines now. Now, how do we get a bit deeper and really nail that? And probably as our technology advances, how do we make our platform more customized for each journey?
Okay.
Not everyone's the same and they shouldn't be treated the same either. And so how do we really specialize that journey for each of them, which we've started to do. So that's probably the next real focus for us.
Yeah, and the challenge from a tech architecture point of view is to keep the backbone the same, but have those different lenses of the different customers you've got, so you're not like maintaining 6 or 7 different code bases for different, because that just becomes its own problem.
Yeah, the guys have already built in the capability to toggle on, toggle off certain core features and functionality. A prime example is we work with the Miami Dolphins in the US. They've got a really great fan engagement, community engagement aspect to their club where they've got roughly 30,000 volunteers built around the club. They all volunteer through Rostify to connect to the wider community. It's soup kitchens, school clinics, whatever it is.
Okay.
And now we've built in a point system. So every engagement they're doing, they're earning points, and then you can effectively transact those points for merchandise or memberships, whatever it is. So we have a sort of base level technology around that, but that's a particular type that maybe that doesn't relate to a major event because they don't really care about the points. They just care about the experience. So that's like one little example of where we can toggle that on or toggle that off for a client. We've got lots of those different elements in the system. Terrific.
So I want to get to the Sports Geek Closing 5. I'm here with Shannan Gove from Rostify. You've been to a lot of sports events in the last 10 years, but do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
As a child?
Well, that would be the first one, unless your first event was as an adult.
Absolutely. Well, I'm a big Cats fan, so probably with my dad and some of my family friends. It is. But I also really remember one of the big finals. I think we played Carlton up at the G.
Okay.
And I remember that being a real big moment. I just loved it. Big Cats man from now on.
Well, you've had a pretty successful period, so you'd be pretty happy at the minute.
Yeah, and I'm very surprised at how the boys are going now. Hopefully they can hold on.
Yes. Same goes. You would have been to a fair few sports events. Do you have a favourite food memory of an event you've attended?
Look, there's been lots of different ones. The chili cheese dog over in the States is an interesting one. The chips and gravy and cheese is always a nice one for the diet when you're overseas.
In the poutine.
I spent a bit of time in Canada, and that's quite a unique dish.
It's a quite dangerous dish.
It doesn't make you feel too good afterwards, but
shout
it's
out
good.
to all our Canadian friends.
Absolutely.
But it can make you feel a little bit heavy the next day.
Correct.
Now, operating a business that has workforce around the world, what's the first app you open in the morning?
LinkedIn for me.
Okay.
If we're talking about social media.
What's the first app when you wake up in the morning? Is it
first thing for me is probably Herald Sun app. Just read the news.
Catch up on the news.
To be honest, I try and stay away from the social medias like there's Instagrams and things. It just wastes time for me. So more LinkedIn, and because I actually care about some of the stuff that's on there and often up some updates and stuff. Yeah.
Terrific. Is there someone that you follow or read or that you suggest the podcast listeners should be following and check out what they're doing?
It'd probably be David Gravenberg, who's actually the CEO of the Com Games Federation.
Okay.
Over in Birmingham. It's just real information. It's nothing fluffy. You genuinely.
So he's just sharing the behind the scenes of running an org and the challenges around that and the challenges of events.
Yeah, but not even so much that. More commenting on latest news and things that have been happening, but giving a real honest lens to them.
Okay.
And relating it back to major events. And I think that's quite refreshing sometimes to see that. And even sometimes saying that perhaps this is something we've made mistakes on in the past and what we can improve on. And my thing the whole time, and even just the way we like to operate, is just be transparent in the way you communicate, because the more you openly transparent to everyone, the more behind closed doors you're probably going to be exactly the same, and that's very important, I think. So I've always respected the way that he communicates to his audience.
All right, we will put a link to David's LinkedIn in the show notes. Last one, you may have spoiled it already, but what social media platform is your MVP?
For me, it's LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I think it's just a great way to share what you're up to, and again, just being honest and transparent in the way you communicate. I think people appreciate the hustle and people working hard in what they're trying to do in an honest way, and so the more you can share that information. Sometimes you feel like you're oversharing and people don't really care about it and stuff, but often you hear the counter. You hear when you meet people, they say, "Oh, I've seen what you guys are up to. It looks great." And so I guess that's all you can go off. Maybe we are spamming a bit too much, but hey, let's whatever.
But I think we're similar in our LinkedIn sort of base in what we share and that kind of stuff. But it's also like you're talking to like people at CEO level, but then also the event management, workforce managers who aren't like the digital folk that are sharing all their things. So you being that voice in that space, they're like, that's why they are following, because there's not a lot of people talking about solving that problem. So
Yeah,
that's
correct.
what I think LinkedIn is doing that well, and obviously the algorithm's kicking in, and so more people that you are eventually going to work with from a Rossify point of view.
Yep.
That's sort of why it does work for you.
Yeah, that's right. I think as much content you can build into your website as well, linking back to there is pretty key. Because when a situation pops up or a client says, "Oh, but have you dealt with this?" or "This is my challenge at the moment," you can easily pull that up at any time and share with them and go, "Yeah, it's not a unique thing. We solved this 3 months ago with this person. Here it is."
Yep.
And you're not making it up. You're not being dishonest by trying to then go away and type something up. You've got this information there because you actually care about it, and it's something that's on your website from previous. And I think that's the honesty of that is very important.
And you're constantly in customer feedback, like whether
Correct.
you've got all these people running events, you're checking in on seeing how their events are going and seeing what fires they're having to put out, what issues they might be having,
For sure.
whether they're related to what you're doing or just overall, like when major when things impact events that are out of your control.
Yep.
How do they adapt, and then you've got to look at it from your lens of how can our software
For sure.
adapt to that situation. So that's where it's a good spot for you as well.
Absolutely. And I think that hopefully that white paper we've created is something that centralizes that, and we can share that with people.
Okay, so that's what it was my lead into. Where can people get the white paper from?
Sure. Just rostify.com, and it's quite clearly there on the website. So feel free to head along there, and otherwise I'll probably be sharing it on my LinkedIn, just Shannan Gove, Shannan Gove.
No worries, that's what it's. So the best platform to connect with you,
Yeah,
LinkedIn.
that's the one, yep.
We'll get people to link in with you. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
New workshops on audience, content, distribution, valuation, and pitch following Sports Geek's Digital to Dollars process. Go to digitaltodollars.com.
Thanks again to Shannan Gove. Please connect with him. Send him a tweet at Shannan Gove. It's SHANNANGOVE, as he mentioned on the podcast. Or connect with him on LinkedIn. As we discussed, we're both big fans of LinkedIn. You can connect with him on LinkedIn. The links to what he mentioned, the white paper he mentioned, will all be in the show notes. SportsGeekHQ/236, or you can go to rostify.com to get access to that white paper. Maybe your event managers and people trying to run your staff will be interested in some of the tips from experts from around the world. Before I wrap up, I just want to quickly chat about the Digital to Dollars process, how it can work for you and your team and your brand. If you haven't listened to the podcast and haven't heard me talk about the Digital to Dollars process, it's across 5 pillars. It's something that we're currently doing in the esports space with Gravitas. It's helping us frame our sponsorship pitches and helping frame to the market on what we can offer, because the pillars are know your audience. We're talking about who the audience of the OPL teams is, who the audience of Gravitas is, who the audience of the Sumner Society, a community group that we've got access to, so we can now profile and say these are the people we're talking to. It's super critical from a digital point of view, from a sponsorship point of view, but then also from your content digital team's point of view, which leads into knowing your content. What is the content you're developing? What's the actions you're wanting out of it? Who are you doing it for? Is super important. And then the next piece is knowing your distribution. You've got this great content franchise. Where do you want to post it? What channels are going to work best? What channels are going to get engagement? What channels are going to get views? What channels are going to get traction and data for your sponsors potentially? So, and then how would you use the old school channels like email? So the know your distribution is really critical, and audience content distribution really sets the backbone for your digital strategy and helps you lock that in. And then you move into the commercial side of it, understanding, know your value, understanding what you're going to value your content at, your posts at, your platforms at, to start giving you those builder blocks to do the final part, which is know your pitch. How can you build out a commercial property that is attractive to sponsors, both from your branded content that you're doing, but then also the campaigns that you might do that fit with both your goals and your sponsors' goals. And it's really a big opportunity, as I spoke about earlier, to get that data not only for you from a ticketing point of view and driving more season ticket sales, but then also for the outcomes of your sponsors. So if you want to get in touch to understand how digital to dollars could work for your business, for your brand, for your digital team, for your commercial team, whether you're a league, a team, an athlete, a coach, or even a business, please get in touch, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com, or check out digitaltodollars.com. For more information about the process, as I've been saying recently, it's a process that we've built over the last 10 years, over many workshops with many different clients, and it's good to actually get it in a nice, cohesive format and have it in a few different methods for it to be delivered, whether it be over multiple workshops with the team, one-day league workshops, two-day league workshops. Really dive in to start looking at how you can better commercialize your digital assets. Last thing, before I sign off, have you subscribed? Are you a subscriber? Yeah, I know you're a subscriber to the podcast. You listen to the podcast, whether it be on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, which now apparently allows searching inside podcasts. That's going to be a game changer if we start seeing quotes from Sports Geek podcast guests coming up in Google. I think that's going to be a real game changer for podcasts. But also you can subscribe to our email newsletter. Sports Geek News comes out every week. It's the articles that I read around the digital marketing, technology, sports business, esports space. If you want to subscribe, you can simply go to sportsgeekhq.com/SGN. And additionally, we've kicked off one in the esports space at sgesports.com. So if you want something that's more esports focused, you want to know what I'm reading to stay with latest trends and what's happening both here in Australia but also around the world, what's happening in sponsorship and team acquisitions and the like, you can go to sgesports.com and sign up for that one. Until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Follow our League of Legends esports team at gravitas.gg. For more resources, go to sportsgeekhq.com. Looking for new campaign ideas to drive new and fresh data and leads? Contact Sean to find out how Sports Geek can help you drive fans into your stadium. It's all about the cheeks in the seats.